Well, well, well.
Who could have predicted this?
I had to think long and hard about how I wanted to approach this review, because despite all the bad in this movie, all the controversy, all the press, and everything Nolan and his team did to destroy, deconstruct, and recontextualize the story of Odysseus' return home, there's still a few things in here that are actually pretty cool. So, let's get one thing clear off the rip. This film is not a good adaptation of the Odyssey. It's bloated, it's boring, it's washed out. It somehow manages to set a breakneck pace and be excruciatingly slow. It intentionally misses the point of both the story and the characters in it, so Christopher Nolan can try and deconstruct one of the most enduring tales in human history. No one asked for this. On the other hand, if this had been billed as an homage to the Odyssey, a Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey, if you will, if they had made damn sure that audiences knew that this was his take on it, I would bet that it wouldn't be receiving the backlash that it is deservedly taking at the moment. But no, it was advertised as a definitive version of Homer's epic. It is not. If you want to see a definitive version, go watch Armand Assante's made-for-TV miniseries over on Amazon and Tubi, at least as of July 2026. Hell, go watch the SpongeBob SquarePants movie. Now, I'm trying to keep this video to a reasonable length. Nobody wants to watch a 30-minute review of the same 30 seconds of looping footage, but I would love to have a good faith discussion in the comments. So, if you've got thoughts, or if you're wondering about something I didn't cover, head down there and let's talk about it. So, bearing all this in mind, let's get into it. Now, there has been a justifiable uproar regarding the language used in this film, and how Nolan wanted to modernize it for some inexplicable reason. Like many of you, I railed against it listening to Robert Pattinson say "daddy," or Matt Damon's war cry of "let's go." The words were out of place, their delivery was cringe as fuck, and they made no sense given the era in which the film takes place. Well, after having watched the movie, I'm here to say that they make even less sense now. All those lines in the trailer are really the only times, barring maybe one or two exceptions, where the language is so cringe-inducingly modern. Like, to such an extent that I have to wonder if it was all done solely to try and drum up controversy ahead of the release. For the majority of the movie, the actors are able to read their lines with the appropriate gravitas for a story like this. Don't get me wrong, I would have preferred clean British accents in the vein of Gladiator, but films like Dune and now The Odyssey have shown us that it is possible to project the appropriate seriousness using an American accent. In fact, if I had watched Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey, I would have been fairly satisfied with how he'd chosen to interpret the language. Barring Daddy, of course. Now let's move on to the cast. With two exceptions, those being Elliot Page and Zendaya, everyone turned in a believable and, in some cases, admirable performance, given what they had to work with. Matt Damon, who was always a solid performer, deserved a better movie. John Bernthal should have been Odysseus in the first place, but he does a good job as Menelaus. I was on the fence with Anne Hathaway going into this movie, but when they aren't trying to plaster the victim label all over Penelope, she actually takes to the character like a duck to water. Even Tom Holland, who I thought couldn't really act beyond Peter Parker prior to this, does a good enough job with this interpretation of Telemachus. Don't get it twisted, it's not a good interpretation, but he does an admirable job with it. Now, let's get controversial. One thing I want to make very clear before we do, though, is that I have no issues with what someone wants to do with their body or who they want to be. If you make those decisions of your own free will and without coercion, and you don't try to force your decisions and opinions on other people, you do you. It's none of my business. But Elliot Page was the wrong choice for the character of Sinon, who was himself a fan fiction character inserted by Virgil 2 centuries after the original poem was created. Do you see what I mean, though? Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. Anyway, I did not for 1 second, believe that Elliot Page was a Greek soldier. The laughable size difference aside, everything from the way Elliot ran, to the way they sat, to the way they chewed was different enough to a biological male that it pulled me completely out of the narrative. Elliot's dialogue performance was fine, I guess. Nothing that couldn't have been accomplished by an actor that wouldn't have inspired so much controversy. And at the end of the day, I have to wonder once again, was this a ploy to try and drum up free publicity? Type your hate comments if you must, but I'm just being honest about my take on this film. In typical Christopher Nolan fashion, the world he created in this film is at once both beautiful and sterile. It feels like a dying world, a world where humanity is struggling to hold on by their fingertips, and all the magic is being sucked out of it like a high school kid getting their first hickey. It's a world that people pass through, not one people live in. And in places, this feeling works, but the majority of the time, it doesn't. Ancient Greece was a thriving civilization. The gods they worshipped and the monsters they feared were every bit as real to them as the waves and storms they fought against. In the Odyssey, it feels like the only people that live in ancient Greece are the ones we're seeing on screen, separated from one another by impassable tracts of land and sea. While this approach, this sterility, has worked wonders for Nolan in the past, this time it makes the movie feel cheap in a lot of places. Like, significantly so. The city of Troy, for example, feels like a movie set. A big one, without a doubt. But the set dressing and disproportionately small amount of extras was very obvious as the movie progressed. So much so that there was a tower they built for this set that they shot tipping over from about 4 different angles and then tried to splice into the film at different moments to make it look like different buildings collapsing. When you're already going so minimalist and your cityscape is so small, that stuff becomes very obvious. Don't get me wrong, I applaud Nolan's stubborn refusal to use CGI any more than absolutely necessary, but there are a lot of moments in this film where it was necessary and he just didn't do it. And to add insult to injury, where he did use it, it looked like crap. The monster Scylla in particular looked awful. Like he hired an AI company to make one pass on the CGI and just called it good. He could have made a legitimate effort to bring back old school techniques, bigatures and model work, Harryhausen-esque fight sequences, anything to increase the scale of his shots. Now, this is not to say that it was all bad. Circe's sequence, the trees moving and shifting during the Lystragonian battle, everything that happened in Hades, even aspects of the Trojan horse, which I was originally very annoyed by. All these things work and work well. I just feel like he could have gone further with it. The Odyssey is one of the most important pieces of literature in human history, bar none. It has survived almost 3,000 years because the stories it tells and the lessons it teaches are so intrinsic to the human experience that they cannot be improved upon. For ancient Greeks, this wasn't just some tale they told each other around the fire for shits and giggles. It taught Greek men about loyalty, honor, courage, and strength. It taught them how to be Greek men. Odysseus represented everything that it was to be a man. He was wise, courageous, intelligent, strong. He loved his men and he worshipped his gods and he stayed loyal to his wife. And before you yell at me in the comments, his experiences with Calypso were the result of her drugging and graping him. For Greek women as well, it taught them how to move in their male-dominated world. Penelope is a paragon of a character that had the quiet strength and brilliant intellect to hold off over 100 suitors for 20 years, at a time when women were expected to kowtow to the men around them. She kept the faith. She loved her son. She trusted her husband, and she fought like hell to preserve all that they'd built together. Odysseus and Penelope are marriage goals, and I'll go to the mats with anyone who thinks otherwise. So, when Christopher Nolan comes in and tries to put his spin on it using a translation of the original poem that fundamentally misses the point of the whole damned epic, it pisses me off. He pays lip service to the stories within it in only the vaguest possible terms, thereby stripping them of all context, but expecting them to retain their emotional and spiritual resonance. The Cyclops' tale goes from a story about a man using his intelligence to defeat a foe many times his size, thereby saving his men, to little people run away from a big monster. The stories in the Odyssey are parables, meant to instruct. We don't need someone coming in to try and strip them back for modern audiences. And for those of you whose interactions with the Odyssey will only be through this film, I implore you, go read the Fitzgerald translation or watch the Armand Assante miniseries. Experience this story as it was meant to be experienced, as Homer wanted it to be experienced. At the end of the day, this movie irritates me for two main reasons. One, this is not the Odyssey. This is not the story that Homer told. It is not the epic that has watched entire civilizations rise and fall around it while it has stood tall as an immovable piece of literature. Two, I don't hate what Nolan tried to do with the narrative. Conceptually, I like the idea of humanizing Odysseus, of showing how he struggled with the reality that the sacking of Troy was, at the end of the day, his fault and his responsibility. I like the idea of peeling back the impersonal layers that surrounded all the characters in this tale and making a case for what they might have actually been like. But I and everyone else that watches this movie has been lied to by Nolan when he says that this film is the Odyssey. It's not. This film is Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. And to assert otherwise is not only disingenuous but dangerous, as the stories told in this poem have retained their importance for millennia, and I worry that this movie will only serve to water them down. People watch movies now rather than read books. Good or bad, it's a fact of life. And for many, their only experience with the epic will be with this movie. So in reality, Nolan and his team are tricking people into believing this pale imitation, with all its subversive messaging and all its baggage, is accurate. And that, more than anything else, is what disgusts me about this film. Anyway, that's all I've got for you this time. So if you could do me a favor and hit the like and subscribe buttons, I'd really appreciate it. Every little bit really helps me out. Also, head down to the comments and let me know if there's anything you guys would like to see me cover in the future. And, while you're at it, go ahead and take a look at the other videos on my channel, or hit up my website to see my blog and maybe check out one of my books on Amazon. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.